My name's Joe Woodham. Welcome to All Things Design, the podcast that unpacks how design drives digital transformation. Today, we're speaking with Nicholas Nelson, Digital Creative Director at Westpac. Nick, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Nick, give us a bit of a background. How did you become a designer?
Yeah, it's a bit of a story. I'll try and keep it under 2 hours, but yeah, I've had a really interesting journey. Managed to live in a few different countries, so I've had good experience from all across the board, from bigger companies, smaller companies. This role that I'm in now is actually quite a new one for me, being at a big bank and a company the size of Westpac. Initially, I started off as a landscape architect. I jumped over into web when it started looking pretty promising, started blowing up quite a few years ago now. I worked in Sydney, various design companies. I had a good opportunity to live in San Francisco, so that was really interesting to work for some Fortune 500 companies like Cisco and Citrix, eBay, CNET. So really good to get that perspective and just, be over there where it's great to be a digital designer in San Francisco and see all the latest things coming out. Then I actually went to Brazil and had my two kids, so got to work in a little digital agency in Rio de Janeiro. A whole different culture, language barrier, all the rest of it. But they wanted to learn English and I wanted to learn Portuguese. I ended up speaking English most of the time and just went along with it. Yeah, busy period of my life with raising two kids as well. They have a really amazing aesthetic, very cultural, especially on the music front, painting side in Brazil. And yeah, just really stimulating to be in that environment, soak it up. And then, back to Sydney where I've sort of headed a bit, I guess, into the banking area with a banking related company before that. But yeah, heavily into sports too, the sport, NRL, group of websites, redesign and things like that. So yeah, really broad background, good mix of all types of companies in different countries.
So many questions come just off that introduction. First, I'm going to start. How does a landscaper see that web is blowing up and making the decision that, all right, landscaping's not my thing, I'm going to go digital and make that transition?
Bit of a world apart, isn't it? Yeah. First, it's all, my mum was a massive gardener. I've always been into architecture and loved being outdoors. So I think it was just a good mix of that. But yeah, essentially it's design, working with design principles. I think it was so exciting just seeing this kind of new invention take off. I guess the last couple of years of school, Netscape Navigator and just playing around on browsers and games and whatever. So yeah, I knew it was very exciting, and I've always wanted also, I guess, graphic design was another choice, but seeing that was very print focused and seeing how the interactivity would be a really exciting place to head in. My uncle's a graphic designer, so had that exposure. So I think that really helped bridge it for me, having an artistic mom, uncle being graphic designer, seeing what was happening with the web and digital direction. So yeah, kind of made the jump from that. It's very immediate too, graphic design and digital designs. So I really like that. I got ADHD, so that actually helps with that immediacy and getting something back. Whereas architecture and landscaping, you could be on projects for years. It's probably a different part of the brain, very analytical, which I enjoy, but probably not to that extent. So I just thought it'd be a better fit. And yeah, getting to travel the world also, I guess that was in the back of my mind. I grew up in Fiji when I was a boy, so I always had a thought of what could I actually travel with too. So yeah, a few things coming into the mix there to help me jump over.
Yeah, kind of sounds like it worked out well. And then Brazil, how long did you end up in Brazil for?
So 3.5 years. Initially just went for a bit of a holiday. My wife's Brazilian. We were both living in California and it was during Carnival. So a lot of excitement in the air and end up having our first kids. Maybe it was a 2-month, kind of work break turned into, 3.5 years. We had our second kid over there. So we end up staying a lot longer with all the help from the family. And that opportunity to spend time in Brazil was, 3.5 years in total.
It's probably the perfect time with kids to do it while they're that young, because it's not like you have to put them into schooling or anything like that yet. So having family around to help and them not being needing to be anywhere is great.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest part. Leading with all that support. Brazilians are very family orientated, so But yeah, it's amazing actually architecture there, and actually got married at this famous landscape architect who did the, you might be familiar with Copacabana, and by the beach, you've got that very iconic pattern, kind of a curvature, a tile pattern right on the, all the way along Copacabana and Ipanema as well. So we actually got married at his house. He's got a chapel that he did up with his brother years ago, since passed away. That, yeah, so that kind of came in. So yeah, very stimulating creative side. Spending time in Brazil, I would recommend it. Yeah.
How cool. I haven't been yet, but it is on the list. It sounds amazing. But let's go back to, you're back in Sydney now. You're at Westpac. What does a creative digital director do?
Yeah, so it's an interesting title. I actually went for a different role, but that one came up. So I was intrigued myself, having not experienced that title, I guess, in all my years of being a product designer and so forth. But yeah, I guess with the organization side of it, they have this role that kind of really bridges brand marketing into the digital world, whereas they didn't have this role before. And someone that doesn't have to directly manage a team, more time to work strategically, basically more thinking time, and someone who can be that contact across digital and brand. So yeah, it's probably not the most accurate title for like day in, day out work that I do, whereas I'm heavily like a UI designer. So I'll get really into the granular components. I've built design systems before and worked really closely with the Westpac design system team. But yeah, that's a real, to have that hands-on work is really useful for when you're zooming all the way out into these bigger brand concepts and stitching strategy together. Being able to contribute on that small level and interpret how components can link up with the design vision, really straddle that broad end-to-end piece, has been, yeah, really satisfying. And I think ultimately gives a better customer experience because you're aligning your strategy top to bottom, not just from a higher sort of traditional creative direction view. Yeah, having that link into brand on really quite how they're talking about the brand, how it's coming out above the line, but they don't have so much exposure below and in digital experiences. Not just passing on design brand principles or patents and so forth. It's my job to really interpret that and translate it deeply into a holistic product experience, components, patterns, and making sure those expressive brand elements are showing up in our digital journeys as well.
What are some of the challenges that come with that, especially at a place as large as Westpac is? Like, talking through some of the challenges that you've had to face trying to get the vision and alignment right.
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects that come into it. Where do I start? But it's also the timing of, you get a real appreciation for the timing of projects. You don't have the luxury of designing from the ground up. So you're often injecting yourself into a feature initiative or a piece of work on a platform. And you're trying to, my role is to kind of stitch together those journeys across different platforms that have different upgrade and technology cycles and so forth. So some, if you're trying to buy up a product or get a loan account, you'll actually straddle a number of different platforms. So that can be really jarring if the components that draw upon that have been built at different times. You don't have the luxury of doing kind of mass updates. Some of the components aren't dynamic either. So you might not have tokens that you can update and that streams across everything. So you have to be really strategic about what you can narrow in on, and kind of, you have to build a business case on that experience layer that straddles a lot of different platforms and so forth. Data visuals, for example, we would use different data visual libraries from different vendors or different platforms. The challenge is there to get them consistent or to get a higher level of data viz happening across the business. So if you want to look at uplifting that, you'd have to build a business case and represent that from an experience point of view.
Yep.
To enable that initiative. So there's a lot of kind of experience layers straddling across the product experience. that you have champion and that traditional product owners wouldn't have that lens, how it's playing out across journeys, or they wouldn't champion a product experience layer like that is like a design language piece, or even down to sort of small tiles, how they're represented on the phone, how they're represented elsewhere. And you don't do that, or you don't have that exposure, then you're going to get this janky kind of different component design across the whole journey.
So who are you working with across that journey? Like, I imagine there's multiple stakeholders. Are they the product owners? Like, who you actually having to deal with on a daily basis?
Yeah, product owners, design system team. We have journey owners as a customer goes through different parts of the product or brand. They hit like a specific journey. It could be deepen, for example, where you're already a customer and you want to change something around your product. So there's a special design team around that. And then they have their own product owners. We have a head of experience, of course, working closely with strategy. And then on the build side, for example, or product side, they've got also their leader who's aligning to strategy. They've got their own strategy, but they need to align up, like further up the food chain. So I'm trying to link into them, getting their strategic outcomes. It could be customer outcomes, business outcomes, experience outcomes, and then kind of referencing and linking those together. So we're not just designing in our space while they're not building technology just within their space without referencing the experience side of it or tapping into the ultimate strategic side of it. And that's very complex within an organization so large. And even to the terminology, there's a new leader in different departments. We've just had a new CEO. They have their own language that they want to lead with. And then that needs to then cascade down and fit into how we talk about experiences and products. So it's a challenge to just get on the same page language-wise, because I could be isolated because there's just so many teams that you don't have regular contact, then you're speaking a different language and we all work remotely. So that puts another, very different from a smaller company.
And on top of all those different conversations or those different communication styles and sort of piece it all back together to communicate with the different product owners or different design teams to make sure everyone is on the same page.
We have ceremonies and check-ins that give us exposure to those broader leadership talks or meetings. And then on my side, I'm trying to have stakeholder interviews, for example, or even in person collectively bring them into a room, show them a huge journey map or whiteboard. I think that's really helpful too, rather than the remote, just bringing into a physical space, letting them hear from their peers as well on how they might articulate it and putting something in front of them so they have a sort of a mental model or framework to reference the experience design. Yeah. So it's really triangulating all that a bit can be done one-on-one, but I think it's a combination of that one-on-one relationship, the holistic bringing them into a physical space really helps. And then those higher ceremonies that are leadership talks or, different divisions talking about how they're describing things or what the strategy is. And our head of strategy also helps translate a lot of broader conversations down into our group.
Yeah. Right. Did your role exist before you joined Westpac? So you had to kind of pocket the framework and then implement that framework through trial and error. How did you go about doing that? Where did you go to find out, how do I build this? Who do I speak to? What do I do here? What was your...
I think that's why I like this role and I find it really satisfying, and probably a good skill set I've got is that because of my broader background, both different cultures, countries, size of companies, and even like industries. Also, within that journey, I had my own design business for a number of years. So I love that freshness of working on, and being in the internet, right? You can work on any business. So it's really interesting to discover, different industries, different businesses, how they market, how they brand, how they do design. So I think that's been a real help to just get in there and kind of be flexible and not have something that existed before and helping shape that yourself. I guess there's always aspects I could draw on from design principles and platform principles and so forth. But yeah, there wasn't that connection with brand. So I think that's what they saw in creation of this role, someone to really represent experience and be able to communicate that to brand, and brand having someone to translate what they're doing back into digital.
Yeah. So like, first of all, like, do you head into report into the head of design? Like, who are you reporting to? Like, how do they go, all right, we understand what Nick's doing. Nick's doing a good job. He's bringing everyone together and taking everyone on the right journey. Like, who's holding you accountable for this? Because it kind of seems like you're across a lot of areas at the moment.
And we've had a few restructures as well, so it has changed a bit. But basically, I had a head of design that I meet with regularly. We're actually in what we call the Deepen channel, which is our mobile app. So we've done a lot of work with that over the last year and picked up a number of awards, really satisfying. But being in that kind of main hero channel, everyone's, who's using the app pretty much is a customer of Westpac. That really then can flow out to other channels. And that's kind of the leading edge. So him having a really good visibility of that and being deeply involved in that team. And we go up further to head of strategy, who was actually a different area outside of experience. They're still in what we call digital, but they were purely the digital strategy team, where we had the experience team with all the kind of designers, hands-on designers. So that leadership is now joined. So we have a tighter strategic connection. So there's not a separate leader for strategy and a separate leader for experience. They now have the one leader who is from the strategy team. She was head of strategy. So that's been, I think, really helpful to be able to shape my direction and language to those strategic frameworks or directives that they've created. Whereas before I was doing that, but it was because we had different leaders. It was not as tight.
Okay. I guess in an organization the size of Westpac, like, and in a role that is relatively ambiguous by the sounds of it, like, how do you build those strategic connections in the right places to ensure that you are doing your role or speaking to the right people to make sure the role's being done properly?
Yeah, so my head of strategy will help me with that, create those connections, making sure that across departments, I'm speaking to the right people. And yeah, that's been really helpful to form relationships. Then off the back of that, a project will spin up, for example, where I'm working with technology, I'm working with a design system personnel, I'm working with myself to then shape up consistencies across a journey. But within the team is a person deeply embedded from, say, product or from technology. With my head of strategy forming up relationship, like I probably wouldn't have been able to know who the right person was, or get to that result as fast.
Yep.
Yeah, that's working really closely with the right people in my team to then go up and have them knowing problems I'm trying to solve to then find the right person to represent.
Okay. And look, how do you operationalize your role? So how do you make sure it's all working smoothly as you run through the process?
Yeah, so that's kind of working really closely with my peers. So, for example, I'll have my creative direction articulated and a kind of a bit of a framework worked out, but that's not going to be operationalized or well governed if I'm not tapping into, say, the content strategy or the research strategy or the strategic direction for the app, for example. So it's those people that then I work together and we're really synchronized in our activities. So it might be feeding into, say, a research plan that then they're running through the stakeholders with, but they're really representing the design with the questions they ask stakeholders. They represent content strategy. So we're not sort of feeding in together and really well aligned, and that's not going to happen. yeah, so that's working really closely with those representatives. Again, like using the same language, the content strategy is not coming up with different terms and so forth. They're referencing the creative direction, and then I'm referencing the content strategy direction. So there's really good kind of back and forwards going. So when we're presenting to stakeholders collectively, they kind of really understand where we're all coming from, and it's a story that kind of makes sense across all those different disciplines. Where if I did that individually, they would be, all right, that sounds amazing. Like, and then how does that kind of fit into content strategy? And they would have then that other one-on-one relationship, but by bringing it together, they can see how all those pieces work. I think, and then from a strategy level, they've got confidence in where we're working really like hand in glove to get the outcome.
Interesting. Look, obviously going into a role is as interesting as yours. So what are some of the biggest wins that you felt that you've had over your time with Westpac so far? Like, what have you been able to achieve creating this role and sort of growing with the role?
There's wins that are on the surface might not seem that could, but when you're working in the trenches and you're seeing you've got the visibility of the complexity or the kind of understanding of all the interconnecting parts, it is like a big win personally. So yeah, we've been able to push things forward from a design system point of view. That's had impact across different products and different journeys. So that goes towards creating like a seamless product experience. Then brand wise, I've been able to really inform them and give them a really good understanding of how brands infused into the product journey. And even on the marketing side, being able to express and articulate feature within the app. This could be like budget planner. So, people have, I think on average, they spend about 40 seconds in our app, which is pretty normal for a digital banking experience. So in that time, they're checking their balance and maybe they do a quick payment. So you've got that really little window to capture their attention and not bug them because it's core banking. It's they go in there to do something, not flick through stories and Instagram or whatever. I mean, they must be scrolling through their transactions that, yeah, in that time, if you've got a feature that you think will be really useful for a customer, like a budget planner, and will add a lot of value, then you're trying to merchandise and communicate that. So how do you do that with a few seconds, not to bug them, be a kind of a delightful experience when they're just trying to get in there and pay someone and get out again? So those are some of the challenges that you face into showing how it's worth it for them to spend the time to onboard into a feature, set up your budget planner, for example, and it's going to help them a lot. But trying to do that within a journey that's making the most out of the time is a real big challenge.
I bet. It's not a very big window that you're working with, and within that window, they're going to be trying to get something done in that space of time. So, like, I imagine that comes with quite a few sets of challenges. I'm like, next question is like, as a designer, do you think your skill set has strengthened significantly in your role because you get to see so many different parts of the business? You get to work with so many different archetypes from maybe design perspective. Like, how has your skill set evolved in this role?
Yeah, I think that's been really satisfying. I think as a designer, it's a frustrating role, I think, pretty generally, especially in some industries that haven't traditionally come from a sort of a design perspective, or everyone's understanding now the customer experience and how important that is. But that's really trying to communicate the value of that. Yeah, and you have to build a business case of, all right, what's the return on investment? It can be quite hard to quantify that because of the metrics behind it. If you're trying to say, well, if we add these design components to a feature or experience, that's going to lift engagement. So how do you prove out that business case when it's kind of fragmented across the whole app, for example? So you made the buttons presented better. Maybe they have a corner radius, or they have a slight drop shadow, or there's a spinner within the button when you push it. that kind of these small crafted details, but how do you kind of measure that or sell that into business planning to get funding for it? So yeah, it's an appreciation of what other departments are trying to work towards. So they're not looking at it from so much an experience lens. They're looking at maybe on a purely sales lens or a technology lens. It might be a way cheaper way to build something, but then what's the experience cost? Like it might be cheaper to build it, but then it's a poorer experience and then that's going to cost you. So it's having appreciation for what they're trying to do, and then you can structure the conversations in to how it helps them as well. Which, yeah, before this role, I didn't have that appreciation for just how complex or just spread of departments as well, from brand marketing, sales, and being as big as Westpac, products they sell.
How do you prove the return on investment of making these small changes? And then who are you getting your budget from? Do you have your own budget stream, or do you have to pitch each department that you're trying to make changes with?
Yeah, I think we have a review process that has to kind of put all this together. And then depending on the business strategy, so forth, like we're on a kind of a simplification journey within the bank. So that'll kind of have to measure up against that broader initiative. There are kind of other pieces around that you can join on to. So it might be seeing how you kind of fit into that and then proving but I think that's an ongoing battle for design in general. It's just kind of harder to measure. It's a bit more abstract. It's not something analytics can measure so readily. So it's showing getting good research partners. So we have some really good ones that we work with that will give us leading examples, both inside and outside of banking, that you can draw upon and build up a story with. So you're not just limited to banking experiences. And then engagement metrics like NPS, DAC 30 is your digital engagement over 30 days. There's another one called digital intensity. So they might be engaging, like logging in and out, checking their balances, but that's might not be that useful for you trying to get them to buy another product or get them to use another feature. So the intensity one is one that measures kind of how long they're spending there as well and where they're going. So yeah, having those different lenses helps form up there's another one called like the Forrester Best App Award that also measures over 11, I think, different dimensions. So you can align to those dimensions with the engagement metrics, show leading examples, both in and outside banking. You start to build up a pretty compelling case. And then I'm then linking that into the general app strategy, which will be my business case. And I'll be representing the experience case. So when they look at funding, they've got like that really big picture. It's not just business and technology. It's also the experience side of it. And how do you, it's all right just building a feature, but how does that kind of complement the bigger experience and how does that fit into the brand perspectives? Yeah, so there's a lot of different facets, but that's been a real learning curve as well.
Imagine. Just like, how many, like, do you just have like a list of initiatives that you just like have to pick and choose from? Like, have you got someone feeding you your next project every time you're near completion? Like, where's your work coming from? Or is it just a continuous?
Yes, continuous deluge. We have like planning. So you have technology experience and so forth. They will be sort of going over what is coming up on the horizon. And that might be, all right, we're going to do these initiatives for a year. And that'll be represented from different businesses, from say product, technology, different platforms. So you have that. And the step before that is where you're putting in for funding. So that gets decided every year based on like the broader strategic objectives. That could be like 5 or 10 years. And then once decisions come down, then that funding's kind of locked in. And then you can sort of plan out projects across that. So I'll have an idea of the pipeline across the different journeys, and I'll be coming in here and there depending on if it's a bit more kind of on the visual side, or there might be a new feature that we don't have components for. So we have to invent kind of new patterns or new components that don't seem so different from what we've got. So a lot of time we'll be kind of crafting those newer ones. So you kind of improving on them, but they don't feel too disjointed because you don't have the luxury to just, right, clean slate. We're going to design the best looking patterns and experiences in the world. You have to kind of work. A lot of it's like working with what you've got. What are the small wins you can do? So in 5 years, you actually have kept moving and not because, yeah, I mean, design patterns change all the time too. Like Apple bring out a new design pattern, like Apple Intelligence. So that's a new behavior change. And once that bar's set and consumers have latched onto that and it's a better experience, then your existing pattern will be kind of obsolete or it's a real downgrade. So what are you going to do to move yourself, more in line with some of those leading patterns out there at Spotify or Airbnb? And yeah, Apple Intelligence is an interesting one.
Must get frustrating, like being only able to make incremental changes and you need to get to here, but you can only change this much. And then by the time you even get close to here, something else comes out anyway. So you've got to reshape the next journey for what you're trying to change.
Yeah, especially with a bigger company. You can't move so fast, but you have the advantages of a bigger company. So, big brand presence, big marketing machine behind it. You do have, different skill sets or broader skill sets within a big organization as well. So yeah, you have to kind of leverage what you have. So, smaller companies won't have all that we've got, but yeah, they can move faster. So yeah, it's pros and cons, I think, but kind of being really aware of what are your strengths, what you can tap into is kind of lessens the frustration side of it. And it's really motivating to see where brands going and all the amazing people that have, in that area, all the creatives and so forth. So yeah, which a smaller company wouldn't.
Yeah. I guess there's trade-offs on both sides, right? Like with a smaller company, you can move quickly, you can see your design through to, I guess, coming out on the other side very quickly. Whereas a large organization, you do have, you've got a bigger user base, you've got more you can work with, you've got bigger challenges to solve. It is slower.
Like even a small thing you might do on the app with a new feature or an uplift, like 5 million people are going to be impacted by that. So that's pretty satisfying to know that even might be a small change. It's like, oh, it's just maybe half a second better than quicker or, more elegant than what it was before.
Take the small wins. It's all good. Nick, it was an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. I learned so much. Your role is obviously very unique. It's not something that I come across very often. So the conversation was very insightful. I really appreciate your time. If anyone wants to reach out and connect with you to ask any questions, best place to connect on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Finally, there's a few Nicholas Nelsons out there, but not too many in Australia. Yeah, reach out. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's actually really good to kind of talk through it, try and articulate all of that as well.
Amazing, Nick. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to you.